So our next driving force is sexual selection. Now, sexual selection works very similarly to natural selection in that there's a variation of a trait that provides an advantage to the organism, right? So if I have red lizards and blue lizards, one of these different variations is going to have an advantage over the other. Now, unlike natural selection, sexual selection has nothing to do with survival. Right? The red ones aren't going to live any better than the blue ones. The blue ones aren't going to live any better than the red ones. This has to do with who gets to make babies. Right? And so there is a reproductive advantage of one of these variations. Okay? And there's a couple different ways that this can actually work. Now, most of the time when we think about sexual selection, we think of it in terms of intersexual selection. Right? That is to say that either the male or the female of the species, typically the female, has a preference for one of the two traits. Right? And this is a population-wide preference. This isn't just like one lady peahen happens to like big tails. This is like all lady peahens love big tails, right? And so because the lady peahens love big tails, the peacocks, which are the males, get big tails, right? These big giant tails with the little spotty things on them. And actually, if you want to get into the details about it, it's not necessarily about the bigness of the tail of the peacock. Okay? It's actually how many of the eyes they have on the tail. Right? And so they did some research, and they took some of the peacocks and they cut out the circles off of the tails, but they left the tails big and beautiful. And the female peahens did not like them. They're like, nah, I don't like you. So it's actually about how many of those circles the peacocks have. Okay? And so that is intersexual sexual selection, where between the two sexes there is a preference, and that preference wins out. So if you have the preferred trait, you get to make babies, right? And more of the babies show up with your version, which in this case is the preferred trait. And so more of those babies have that trait. Those babies get to make more babies than the other babies, and eventually you have an overwhelming amount of that variation, right? And that's why you see all of the peacocks have that big tail. Right? If you think about being a peacock in the woods, right? If you're trying to like run away from a wolf, because I guess wolves might eat peacocks, I don't know. That sounds like who would eat peacocks, right? So if you're trying to run away from the wolf, you get this big, beautiful tail, like you're trying to run away, it's crashing into the trees and stuff. That's no good, right? So that's definitely not natural selection. Right? That could only arise through sexual selection. The other way that sexual selection can work is intrasexually, right? And so that's within the same sex, and there's some kind of competition. And so let's pretend there's males fighting for the right to mate with the females. Like if they're deers, right? You get these big bucks with the big antlers, right? And the bucks with the biggest antlers win that competition and they get to mate with the females. Or at least they get priority mating with the females, right? There might be still some females left over that also mate with the other males. But the bucks get to choose, like the bucks with the big antlers get to choose who they're going to mate with. They're going to make more babies, healthier babies. Going to be more of them. Right? And so you'd have sexual selection for the big antlers. It's not because the female deers liked the big antlers. They didn't care about the big antlers. Big antlers look dumb. Females look, you get big, stupid antlers, right? Not the point. Okay? Because the dude was like, yeah, I get to choose, and I choose you, lady deer. And the guy with the little antlers is over there like, I guess I'll just wait till next year. Right? And so, yeah, sexual selection.